I told my boyfriend that if he grabbed the steering wheel while I was driving again, I'd leave him on the side of the road, and he tried to call my bluff. A few days ago, my boyfriend was invited to a house party hosted by his work wife, and when I asked him if he could bring me as his plus one, he said no. According to him, because I don't like to drink, I would ruin everyone's mood and become known as the vibe killer in his work circle. So him not letting me go was actually doing me a favor. Well, I got a call from him about 6 hours later. He was completely hammered and begging me to come pick him up. It was 3 a.m. and his call had just woken me up. So I groggily asked him where his money, that I gave him, for the taxi went. Well, it turns out that Tina, his work wife, was hungry, so they went out to a nearby pizza place and he bought her food. He didn't just buy her food either. He bought her an extra large pizza, 3 sides, dessert, and drink. I was absolutely baffled, but decided that him getting home safely was more important. And so I hopped in the car and made the 45-minute drive over to Tina's place. I finally got there and called my boyfriend, but he didn't answer. It took 7 phone calls for him to respond, and when he got in my car, he said he was sorry, but Tina needed help finding a necklace she had lost. I told him whatever and just started driving, but as soon as I did, he started screaming at me. "That party was so lit. Tina is so funny, you should have seen her impression of you." He then started laughing and in his fit of laughter grabbed the steering wheel for the first time. I was sleepy and annoyed and not in the mood, so I quickly jerked him off and pulled over. I straight up told him that I am not in the mood for this crap right now, and that if he tries to grab the steering wheel again, I will dump him on the side of the road and he can walk back to Tina's house. He just laughed at me saying, "Tina said all you do is talk. That's why your mouth is so big, haha. You won't do that, you love me too much." I ended up starting the car again, but I wasn't even 2 minutes into driving until he grabbed the steering wheel. This time, though, he didn't just grab it. He grabbed it and swerved it. The car ended up skidding right, crashing into a curb and heading into a huge bush. I panicked and started screaming, and only when the car was in the bush did my boyfriend let go of the wheel. He was laughing his butt off, mocking me. "Don't do it again, don't do it again, ooh, see, this is why you're no fun." Thankfully, the car was okay besides a few scratches on the hood, and I managed to reverse out of the bush. I told him to get out because I was driving home alone, and he just looked at me like I was joking. But I wasn't. I told him in full seriousness that either he gets out or our relationship is over. He proceeded to blame me for not getting the joke, and told me he was not getting out of this car unless I made him. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to bait him into getting out of the car by telling him I could feel a flat tire. I asked him kindly to get a spare tire from my trunk so I could change it, and I persuaded him by offering a BJ if he got out and got it for me. Well, as soon as he got out of the car, I pressed on the brakes and drove off. I made it home 30 minutes later and I just cried for the rest of the night. My boyfriend actually showed up at the front door 8 hours later, damp and covered in mud. He said he didn't remember anything that happened, and asked me why my car was so scratched up. I'm not sure if I should forgive him. My boyfriend kept asking me questions about what happened the previous night. He was sitting at my kitchen table, still in his dirty clothes from walking home. I told him everything. About picking him up from Tina's house, him grabbing the steering wheel twice, and the car crashing into the bush. His face changed as I explained, and I could tell he was starting to remember. He got really quiet for a minute, then suddenly slammed his hand on the table. He said I was completely wrong to leave him on the side of the road in the middle of the night. He kept going on about how dangerous it was and how anything could have happened to him. I reminded him that he was the one who put us both in danger by grabbing the steering wheel while I was driving, but he wouldn't listen. I tried explaining how I had warned him multiple times about touching the steering wheel, how scared I was when the car skidded and hit the bush, and how his drunk laughter made everything worse, but he just kept shaking his head and getting angrier. Then he started pacing around my kitchen, saying that a real girlfriend wouldn't abandon their boyfriend on the road no matter what he did. He brought up Tina again, saying she would never do something like that to her boyfriend. That really pissed me off then. After everything that happened at the party, he was still comparing me to her. I stayed calm and told him that a real boyfriend wouldn't endanger his girlfriend's life by grabbing the steering wheel while she was driving, especially after she specifically asked him not to. I also mentioned how he had refused to let me come to the party because I don't drink, then spent the money I gave him on buying Tina an expensive meal. He got even more defensive and said I was bringing up irrelevant things to make him look bad. According to him, the steering wheel thing was just a joke that I took too seriously. He said I was being dramatic about the whole situation and that the bush incident wasn't even that bad. I was done arguing at this point. I told him that his behavior wasn't okay, drunk or not. I mentioned how he had mocked me using Tina's words right before grabbing the wheel the second time. He tried to interrupt me, but I kept going. I told him how terrified I was when the car crashed, and how his laughter during that moment showed exactly how little he cared about my safety. He got up abruptly and said he needed some air. Before walking out, he turned around and said I should think about whether I want to continue this relationship if I can't handle his jokes. Then he slammed the door behind him. I didn't try to stop him from leaving. Actually, I felt relieved when he was gone. The whole morning had just increased my doubts about our relationship. Not only had he refused to take responsibility for his actions, but he had tried to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. Now I'm sitting here thinking about everything that's happened. Part of me wants to forgive him because he was drunk and claims he didn't remember doing those things. But another part of me keeps replaying that moment in the car. How scared I was, how he laughed at my fear, and how he chose to endanger both our lives just to prove a point. I keep thinking about how he prioritized Tina's comfort over my safety, spending my taxi money on her food, then forcing me to drive 45 minutes at 3 a.m. to pick him up. And even this morning, when he was sober, he still couldn't see how wrong his actions were. I haven't responded to any of his texts since he left. Each one is getting angrier than the last, saying I'm overreacting and being childish. But for the first time, I'm wondering if maybe this relationship isn't worth saving. If he can't understand why his actions were dangerous and disrespectful, both drunk and sober, then maybe it's time for me to move on. Update 1. It's been a week since my boyfriend walked out after our argument about the steering wheel incident. He's been coming to get his stuff every couple of days, always when I'm home from work. Each time, he barely speaks to me, just grabs some clothes or his gaming stuff, saying he's staying at his friend Mike's place until he figures out his next move. I had been avoiding social media this past week, trying to get my head straight about everything. But yesterday, while scrolling through my feed, I saw his post. I couldn't believe my eyes when I started reading it. He had written this long, detailed story about how his girlfriend of 2 years suddenly turned cruel and left him stranded on a dark road in the middle of the night. He described how he had to walk for hours in the cold, how cars wouldn't stop to help him, and how he could have been killed. He even added that he got chased by a stray dog at one point, though I know that never happened because he didn't mention it when he showed up at my door that morning. The comments section was even worse than the post. People I've never met were calling me psychotic and abusive. Some were saying I should be charged with endangerment. Others were suggesting he pressed charges against me for abandonment. But what really got to me were Tina's comments. She had written at least 6 lengthy comments, each one worse than the last. In one, she talked about how she always saw red flags in my behavior, how I never let him have fun with his work friends. In another, she described times when I supposedly controlled what he wore to work, which never happened. She kept responding to other commenters with stories about me that were completely made up, painting this picture of me as this possessive, unstable girlfriend who finally showed her true colors. The more I read, the angrier I got. There was not one mention in his post about how drunk he was that night. Nothing about how he grabbed the steering wheel twice while I was driving. No explanation of how he caused us to crash into a bush and then laughed about it. He didn't tell them about spending my taxi money on Tina's expensive pizza order, or how he made me drive 45 minutes at 3 a.m. to pick him up. He completely left out the part where he mocked me using Tina's words right before grabbing the wheel the second time. I tried calling him immediately after reading the post. It went straight to voicemail. I called again and again. After the 5th attempt, I sent him a long text demanding he tell the whole truth about that night. No response. I waited an hour, getting more frustrated by the minute as more comments piled up on his post, all sympathizing with him and condemning me. Finally, I decided to call Mike. I figured if my boyfriend wouldn't talk to me, maybe Mike could tell him to at least edit the post to include the whole story. But when Mike answered, everything got so much worse. Mike was confused when I mentioned my boyfriend staying with him. He said he hadn't seen my boyfriend in weeks, not since their last gaming night. According to Mike, my boyfriend had never asked to crash at his place, and he definitely hadn't been staying there this past week. I felt betrayed. My hands were shaking as I hung up with Mike. All those times my boyfriend came to get his things, all those casual mentions of staying at Mike's, they were lies. I started calling him again, this time switching between leaving angry voicemails and worried messages. Where had he been staying? Why would he lie about something like this? The last time he came to get his stuff was 2 days ago. He took his favorite clothes and his gaming laptop, telling me he was heading back to Mike's to play some online games with the guys. Now I'm sitting here, replaying that conversation in my mind, seeing all the little signs I missed. How he seemed more put together than someone supposedly crashing on a friend's couch. How he always came at the same time, right after work hours. How his clothes never looked wrinkled or lived in. I keep staring at Tina's comments on his post. The way she defended him so fiercely, how she seemed to know exactly what to say to make me look bad. Her last comment especially keeps playing in my head, about how he deserves someone who understands him, who can match his energy and appreciate his sense of humor. When I look back at everything now, him not wanting me at the party, spending my money on her food, the constant mentions of her name, the lies about staying at Mike's, it all adds up to something I didn't want to see before. I feel like such an idiot. All those times he came to get his things, he was probably going straight to her place. I've stopped calling him now. His post is still up, still collecting sympathetic comments and angry reactions toward me. I'm sitting here now wondering how I missed so many red flags, how I let him gaslight me into questioning whether I overreacted that night, when he literally put both our lives in danger. Maybe this social media drama is actually a blessing in disguise, showing me exactly who he is when he thinks he's got everyone on his side. Update 2. After many days of his misleading posts and hateful comments, I decided I'd had enough of being painted as the villain. A week ago, I had sat down and written out the complete story from my perspective, making sure to include every single detail he conveniently left out of his version. I had started from the beginning, how he refused to let me come to the party because I don't drink, and would apparently be a vibe killer. I described how he spent my taxi money buying Tina an extravagant meal, an extra large pizza, multiple sides, dessert, and drinks. I explained about the 45-minute drive at 3 a.m. to pick him up, and how he made me wait while he helped Tina look for a supposedly lost necklace. Then I got to the crucial parts he'd omitted, how drunk he was, how he mocked me using Tina's words about my mouth being too big, and most importantly, how he grabbed the steering wheel not once but twice. I detailed the crash into the bush, his laughter while I was terrified, and how he treated the whole thing like a joke. I made sure to explain that I only left him after he put both our lives in danger and refused to get out of the car willingly. Finally, I added the recent revelation about his lies regarding staying at Mike's place this past week. I ended the post asking if anyone else would have reacted differently in my situation. The responses started flooding in. People began sharing my post and going back to his original post to call him out. Many pointed out how manipulative it was to leave out the drunk driving and steering wheel incidents. Some shared their own experiences with drunk partners putting them in danger, telling me I did the right thing by protecting myself. The tide really turned when people started questioning Tina's multiple comments on his post. They called her out for making up stories about me being controlling, especially after I mentioned I wasn't even allowed to attend the party. Several commenters suggested their relationship seemed suspiciously close for just work friends. Last night, I was reading through the responses when my phone rang. My boyfriend's name flashed on the screen. When I answered, he immediately started raging about how I needed to take down my post right away. He said people at work were looking at him differently and that I was ruining his reputation. He kept insisting that regardless of what happened that night, I was wrong to leave him on the road. I let him rant until he ran out of steam. Then I calmly asked him where he'd really been staying this week. He started stammering about couch surfing between different friends' places, not wanting to burden any one person too long. I cut him off mid-sentence and told him I'd talk to Mike, who hadn't seen him in weeks. There was a long pause. Then I heard movement in the background and a familiar female voice saying something I couldn't quite make out. Before he could respond, there was some rustling, and suddenly Tina was on the phone. Her voice was dripping with fake sympathy as she confirmed that yes, my boyfriend had been staying with her this whole time. She said she was just being a good friend by giving him a safe place to stay after I so cruelly abandoned him that night. She told me I should be ashamed of myself for putting him in that situation, and that a real girlfriend would never do that. That's when I finally lost my composure. I called her out for being a manipulative, relationship-breaking witch who'd been trying to get between us since day one. I brought up every instance, encouraging him to exclude me from work events, convincing him to spend my money on her food, making up lies about me in her comments, and now housing him while he came to get his things under false pretenses. She dropped the sweet act immediately and started screaming back. She said I was just jealous because she and my boyfriend had a special connection. According to her, they could talk about anything for hours, while he always found conversations with me boring. She said he needed someone fun and spontaneous like her, not a stick in the mud who couldn't even handle a harmless joke like grabbing the steering wheel. Mid-argument, the call abruptly ended. I tried calling back several times, but it went straight to voicemail. I was shaking with rage, imagining them together on the other end, probably laughing at my reaction. I looked around my apartment and really saw all his remaining stuff for the first time. His gaming setup was still in the corner of the living room. His clothes still took up half my closet. His favorite coffee mug was still in the kitchen cabinet. All these things he hadn't taken during his supposed trips to Mike's place. I grabbed every trash bag I could find and started filling them. His expensive gaming consoles and controllers? In the bags. The rare edition books he collected? In the bags. All his clothes and shoes? In the bags. I found our matching bracelets from our first vacation in my jewelry box. Those went in too. Every trace of him, every gift he'd given me, every item he'd left at my place over our 2 years together, all of it went into those bags. I hauled everything downstairs and left it by the building's dumpster. Then I sent him one final text. Your stuff is next to the dumpster. Garbage pickup is tomorrow morning at 8. What happens to it after that isn't my problem anymore. My hands are still shaking as I write this update. The reality of everything is finally sinking in. How he spent this whole week going between my place and hers, lying to my face every time. How they probably sat together crafting that misleading post about me, adding dramatic details like the fake dog chase to gain more sympathy. How every time he came to get his things, he was probably heading straight to her place, both of them laughing about how easily I believed the Mike story. But honestly, I don't regret leaving him on that road. If anything, knowing where he went afterward just confirms I made the right choice. My only regret is not seeing through their act sooner. Thank you all for the supportive comments on my last post. You helped me see that I wasn't wrong to protect myself that night, and you gave me the courage to tell my side of the story. I'm turning off my phone for the rest of the day and focusing on cleaning every trace of him out of my apartment. Update 3. It's been 3 months since I threw my ex's things out, and I wasn't planning to update again. But yesterday I got some news that I felt I should share, if only for closure on this whole situation. Mike called me while I was at work. At first I ignored his call because I was in a meeting, but then he sent a text saying it was urgent. When I called him back during my lunch break, he told me that my ex and Tina were in a serious car accident and are both in the ICU. According to Mike, they were at some house party last night. Typical. And despite being completely drunk, my ex decided to drive them home because Tina dared him to. They ended up crashing into a guardrail on the highway at high speed. The car was totaled. Before I get into my feelings about this, I should explain what happened after my last update. The morning after I left his things by the dumpster, my ex showed up around 7 a.m. to collect everything. Tina was with him, of course, in her silver Honda. I watched from my window as they loaded all the bags into her car. She kept touching his arm while they worked, and whenever she noticed me watching, she'd glare up at my window. They took every single bag, even the one with the matching bracelets. That was the last time I saw either of them. After that day, I went completely no contact. I blocked both of them everywhere. Phone numbers, social media, email addresses, even LinkedIn. I switched gyms because mine was too close to their office. I started shopping at a different grocery store to avoid any chance encounters. I needed that clean break for my sanity. These past 3 months have been transformative. I got promoted to project lead at work, which keeps me busy with new challenges. I started taking pottery classes every Wednesday evening, something I'd always wanted to try, but my ex said was a waste of money. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, a sweet orange tabby who loves to sleep on my keyboard while I work from home. Life has been peaceful, productive, and drama-free. So when Mike called yesterday with news about the accident, I felt oddly detached from the whole situation. He described how bad the crash was, how the fire department had to cut them out of the wreckage, how they're both still unconscious with multiple injuries. Then he asked if I was planning to visit them in the hospital. I actually laughed out loud. I asked him why I would visit someone who endangered my life by grabbing my steering wheel, spent weeks lying about where he was staying, let his work wife spread lies about me online, and then ghosted me after a 2-year relationship. Not to mention the woman who encouraged all his worst behaviors right up until they put her in the ICU too. Mike tried to make me feel guilty, but honestly, the man in that hospital bed is a stranger to me now. I told Mike about my full schedule, pottery class that evening, a team celebration for my promotion this weekend, and a furniture shopping trip with my sister next week. My life doesn't screech to a halt because my ex finally faced the consequences of his actions. It might sound cold, but I'm not that same person who would drop everything to drive 45 minutes at 3 a.m. to pick up a drunk boyfriend who had just spent my money on another woman. The situation between then and now are striking. Both times he was drunk and made reckless decisions on the road. But this time, instead of me being there to deal with the aftermath, it was Tina. The same Tina who called me boring for not drinking, who said grabbing the steering wheel was just a harmless joke, who claimed they had a special connection I couldn't understand. I wonder if she still thinks his drunken driving stunts are funny now that they're both in intensive care. Sometimes I really want to dig up their old social media posts about how cruelly I abandoned him that night. I want to comment about how that moment of tough love might have saved both our lives, but I won't give them that satisfaction. I'm done being